The city buzzed with the hum of traffic, the constant shuffle of feet and the distant honk of horns. Downtown was alive, a place where dreams were made and shattered all at once. Among the sea of bustling professionals, tourists and busy commuters, there was one person who stood out, a homeless man named Jack. Jack stood on the corner of Fifth Avenue and Main, his clothes threadbare and worn from days of exposure to the harsh elements. His face, weathered and tired, was a roadmap of the years he'd spent on the streets. His eyes, though dull from exhaustion, still carried a glimmer of something. Hope, perhaps? Or was it the last flicker of a dream long extinguished? The world seemed to move around Jack, as though he was invisible. People walked past him without a second glance, heads down, eyes fixed on the ground or their phones. But then, something extraordinary happened. A sleek black Tesla rolled to a stop in front of him, its tinted windows reflecting the midday sun. The car was a far cry from the beat-up bike Jack used to ride before everything had fallen apart. The door swung open, and out stepped none other than Elon Musk, the tech mogul, billionaire and CEO of one of the world's most influential companies. He looked out of place in this part of town, but then again, someone like Musk could afford to stand anywhere, couldn't he? Jack blinked, momentarily frozen in place. He knew the face instantly. Musk, the man who had revolutionized space travel, electric cars, and now was launching rockets to Mars. But today, in this moment, Jack didn't see a visionary. He saw a man who had everything, a man who could change his life with a single decision. Without thinking, Jack took a step forward, his heart racing. He wasn't sure what compelled him, but the words spilled out before he could stop them. "Hey, Mr. Musk, can you spare $1?" The request was simple, humble even, but in it, Jack wasn't just asking for money. He was asking for something far deeper, an acknowledgement, a recognition of his humanity. Musk's gaze shifted from the road to the man standing in front of him. There was a brief moment of silence. The world around them continued to rush by, oblivious to this brief intersection of lives. Elon Musk looked at Jack, his expression unreadable. Was he going to ignore him, like everyone else? Was this just another homeless man with another story? Another plea for help that would go unheard? But then something unexpected happened. Musk didn't walk away. He didn't turn up his nose or drive off. Instead, he leaned slightly forward, his eyes narrowing. As he processed Jack's request, "What would you do with it?" Elon asked, his voice soft but with an undercurrent of genuine curiosity. The question caught Jack off guard. It wasn't the typical response. Most people, when asked for $1, would hand it over without a second thought. But Musk wasn't. Most people. Jack opened his mouth to respond, but the words caught in his throat. He had asked for $1, but now that he was here, facing the man who could change everything, he realized the question wasn't about money at all. It was about something bigger. Just need something to eat, Jack said, his voice quieter now. Just $1. It's been a while since I had a decent meal. The conversation hung in the air between them, awkward and still. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward even when things get tough? Elon leaned back slightly, his fingers drumming absent-mindedly on the armrest of the car. The conversation had taken an unexpected turn, and the stillness in the air felt heavy. Jack stood there, shuffling his feet, wondering if he had made a mistake asking the question. Most people ignored him. Some even crossed to the other side of the street just to avoid his gaze. He wasn't expecting much, just $1. But this felt different. Elon didn't respond right away. Instead, he studied Jack for a moment, his eyes shifting from Jack's worn-out sneakers to the deep lines of weariness etched into his face. There was something about the man before him, something that caught his attention beyond the usual street encounters. Musk, who had solved problems that seemed impossible to most, was now caught in a dilemma that didn't have a clear answer. "I'm not sure what you're asking for, man," Elon finally said, his voice betraying a hint of confusion. "You're asking for $1, but you want more than that, right?" Jack took a step back, surprised by the directness in Elon's tone. He wasn't used to people actually engaging with him, especially not someone as famous as Musk. It was almost as If Elon saw something more in him than just a beggar on the street, but it also made him feel exposed, like someone had peeled away a layer of his dignity. Could he really do this? Could a man like him with so little make the leap to something bigger? The very thought of a new beginning made his stomach churn with both excitement and fear. What if this was just another false hope, like all the promises he'd heard before from people who didn't understand? Or what if Elon was just trying to appease his conscience, offering empty words without any real intention to follow through? The traffic buzzed around him, the noise of the city drowning out his internal debate. Jack paused at the corner of a busy intersection, glancing up at the towering skyscrapers around him. For a moment he felt small, invisible, just another face in the crowd. The weight of the world felt heavier on his shoulders than ever before. He had asked for $1, that was all. A single dollar to get by, to eat, to keep moving forward. But instead, he had gotten an offer that came with strings attached. Strings that threatened to tie him to something he wasn't sure he was ready for. What if he wasn't cut out for it? What if he failed? A sudden gust of wind whipped through the street, pulling Jack's tattered jacket tight around him. He shoved his hands into his pockets, trying to steady his nerves. "Get a grip, Jack," he muttered to himself. "This could be your chance." But what was he supposed to do now? Where would he even begin? The following days felt like a blur. Jack tried to ignore the anxiety gnawing at him, but it wasn't easy. Every corner he turned, every person he saw, seemed to remind him of the world he had left behind, the world that had given up on him. And now he was supposed to step into a new one. Could he really transition from the streets to something more? Would anyone believe in him? Would they see him for the man he had the potential to be, or just another failure in a long line of failures? Jack found himself standing at the entrance of one of Musk's companies, a modern building with sleek glass windows and a shining logo. It was intimidating, to say the least. He hadn't planned on coming here. The idea of walking through those doors felt surreal, almost like a dream he couldn't quite reach. He hesitated at the entrance, his heart pounding. The people around him looked so sure of themselves, so confident, and Jack felt like an imposter, like a man who didn't belong. What was he even doing here? The security guard at the front desk looked at him curiously, but Jack just gave a quick nod, trying to act like he belonged. He didn't know where he was supposed to go or what he was supposed to do. All he knew was that he had made a decision, and now there was no turning back. When he found the office, the receptionist gave him a strange look. Jack's hands trembled. As he explained who he was, and after what felt like an eternity, she pointed him toward a hallway. Jack's feet felt like lead as he walked down the narrow corridor, his mind racing. Was he doing the right thing? Was this really the chance he had been waiting for? What would he say when he saw Elon again? What if it didn't work out? As he reached the door to a spacious conference room, Jack paused. He could hear voices inside. His palms were slick with sweat. He took a deep breath and knocked lightly. "Come in," came a voice from within. Jack pushed the door open, stepping inside. The room was sleek and modern, filled with glass tables and sleek, minimalist furniture. At the center of it all sat Elon Musk, his sharp features focused on a laptop in front of him. For a moment, Jack felt out of place, unsure of how to approach this. But then he remembered what had brought him here. The chance, the opportunity, he had to take it. Elon looked up from his screen, his expression unreadable. There was no fanfare, no warm greeting, just a quiet recognition that Jack had made it this far. "Jack, right?" Elon said, his voice calm and steady. Jack nodded, feeling the weight of the moment sink in. "Yeah, it's me." "I'm glad you came," Elon said, gesturing for Jack to take a seat. "How are you holding up?" Jack hesitated, surprised by the genuine tone in Elon's voice. "I don't really know," he admitted, sitting down across from him. "I'm trying, but it's hard. I don't know if I'm ready for this. To make something of myself, what if I fail? What if I'm not cut out for it?" Elon leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of him. "Failure is part of the process. It's a given. You've already failed, Jack. You're on the streets struggling to survive. That's failure, right? But that doesn't mean you're done. The question isn't whether you'll fail. It's whether you'll get back up after you do. That's what counts." Jack looked at Elon, his words resonating deeply. Was it really that simple? He had failed so many times before, but maybe this time was different. Maybe he could rise again. Elon continued, "You're not just getting help, you're taking control of your future. It's not going to be easy, but if you really want it, if you really want to change, you've got to show me that you're willing to fight for it." Jack swallowed hard, feeling a spark of determination deep inside him. He had always felt like he was stuck, like he couldn't get out of the hole he was in. But maybe, just maybe, this was the moment he could change everything. It wasn't going to be easy, and he wasn't going to do it alone. But if he was willing to work for it, to fight for it, maybe he could start something new. "Okay," Jack said, his voice stronger than he felt. "I'm ready, I'll do whatever it takes." Elon's gaze softened just a little before he nodded. "Good, let's get started then." For the first time in a long time, Jack felt like he might actually have a shot at something better. The road ahead would be tough, but this was the first step, his first step, and that, he realized, was enough. The first few weeks were the hardest. Jack felt like he was walking on a tightrope, balancing between hope and doubt, success and failure. Each morning, when he stepped out of the small apartment Elon had arranged for him, the world felt both overwhelming and full of possibilities. The streets of the city no longer felt like a place of rejection, but a battleground for change. Every step he took was a reminder of how far he had come from his old life, but also how far he had to go to truly change. Elon had given him a small project to start with, something simple, something that would ease him into the world of work he had long forgotten. It was a task that many would dismiss as insignificant, but for Jack it was everything. He was asked to assist with organizing a new charity initiative for one of Musk's ventures, something that involved sorting donations, managing schedules, and working with people from all walks of life. It wasn't glamorous or world-changing, but it was a start. At first, Jack struggled with the logistics. He had been out of the game for so long, and the skills that were second nature to most people felt alien to him. He'd never been given the chance to learn the tools of the trade, never had anyone show him how to function in a structured, professional environment. Everything felt like a puzzle he wasn't sure he could solve, but Elon's words kept echoing. In his mind, "If you really want it, you've got to show me that you're willing to fight for it." Each day, Jack fought his own insecurities, pushed himself harder than he thought possible. He woke up early, worked late, and found a rhythm in the chaos of the tasks. It wasn't always smooth, and there were plenty of mistakes along the way. Mistakes that Elon never let slide. But Elon didn't criticize harshly. He challenged Jack, guided him, forced him to think outside the box and find his own way. "You've got to trust yourself more," Elon had said during one of their meetings, looking at Jack with a mixture of disappointment and hope. "The only person who's holding you back is you. You can't keep blaming your past for the way you are now. If you want to change, you've got to take control of your future." Jack hadn't realized it at the time, but Elon wasn't just teaching him how to work. He was teaching him how to live again. The hardest part wasn't the work itself, but the emotional battle. Every time Jack walked into a meeting or spoke to someone new, he had to push past the voice in his head that told him he didn't belong. He had to fight the fear that he was just a failure pretending to be someone else. His past, those months on the street, those nights without shelter or food haunted him. They whispered doubts in his ear, telling him he wasn't good enough, that he didn't have what it took to make it in the real world. But there were moments, fleeting but powerful, when something clicked, when the work felt less like a burden and more like a purpose. Jack was learning, Jack was growing. One afternoon, Elon took Jack to a new facility Musk had been working on, a place dedicated to advancing technology for social good. It was buzzing with activity, engineers and designers walking around with the kind of energy that Jack had never felt before. It wasn't just a building. It was a place where people were shaping the future, solving problems that felt insurmountable. And Jack was about to be a part of it. As they toured the building, Elon explained the significance of each project, the way they could change the world. Jack listened intently, trying to absorb every detail, even though it felt like he was out of his depth. Elon stopped in front of a large screen showing a project designed to help communities in need, solar-powered water filtration systems that could be sent to areas without access to clean water. "You see this, Jack?" Elon said, pointing at the screen. "This is what we're doing. We're not just changing industries, we're changing lives, and I want you to be part of it." The words hit Jack hard, like a bolt of lightning. Here was a man who had built companies that revolutionized space travel and electric cars. And now he was telling Jack he could be part of something even bigger, something that could make a tangible difference in the world. It was as if a door had opened in Jack's mind. For the first time, he wasn't just seeing the world from the outside looking in, he was in it. He was part of something bigger than himself, and it was possible. No, it was happening. Over the next few weeks, Jack's confidence began to build. He was given more responsibility at work, and while the tasks were challenging, they were also empowering. Each success, no matter how small, felt like a victory. But the real test came one evening when Elon asked Jack to present a new idea to a group of potential investors, a task Jack had never imagined he would be capable of. His heart raced just thinking about it. The thought of standing in front of all those powerful, successful people, speaking about a vision he was still trying to understand himself, it terrified him. That night, as Jack prepared for the presentation, he sat in his small apartment, staring at the notes Elon had given him. He was alone, no one to turn to for support. Doubts crept in again, the old voices resurfacing, telling him he wasn't good enough. But something had shifted in him. He wasn't the same man who had wandered the streets begging for $1. He was stronger now. He had a purpose, a chance, to prove to himself that he could do this, that he could change. He stood up, took a deep breath, and started practicing his lines in the mirror. The nervousness in his stomach was still there, but now it was mixed with something else: determination. When the time came, he walked into the boardroom, shoulders back, head held high. He wasn't just Jack anymore. He was a man with something to offer, a man who had earned his place at the table. As he spoke, his voice grew steadier. The investors watched him, their expressions unreadable, but Jack could feel it. He was connecting. The ideas flowed, and when he finished, there was a brief moment of silence before one of the investors nodded, impressed. "Interesting," she said, breaking the silence. "Let's see where this goes." It wasn't a yes, but it was something. It was a chance, and for Jack, that was all he needed. As he left the building that night, Jack felt a strange combination of exhaustion and exhilaration. He had taken a leap of faith, and now he was closer than ever to a life he had only dreamed of. The journey was far from over, but for the first time Jack believed in the possibility of a future beyond survival. It felt like Jack had finally found his rhythm. The days were still hard, the work still demanding, but there was a sense of purpose now, something he hadn't felt in years. The fear was still there, lurking beneath the surface, but it didn't hold him back anymore. He was moving forward, and for the first time in a long time he believed in the possibility of a future. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. Just when Jack thought he was gaining control of his new reality, something happened that shook him to his core. It started innocently enough. Elon had invited Jack to a private dinner, a small gathering with a few colleagues and potential partners. The evening had begun like any other, a polite exchange of pleasantries, a few laughs and some casual conversation. But as the night wore on, Jack began to feel a strange sense of unease, as if something was off. It wasn't until later that the truth came crashing down. Elon pulled him aside, away from the bustling crowd, into a quiet corner of the room. "Jack, there's something you need to know," Elon said, his voice low, almost hesitant. "I've been watching you for a while now, more closely than you probably realize." Jack blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" "I wasn't just offering you a second chance because I believed in your potential," Elon continued, his gaze intense. "I did it because I see something in you that I've seen in myself." Jack's stomach tightened. "What are you talking about?" Elon took a deep breath, as if gathering his thoughts. "I've been where you are. I wasn't always the person people saw in the media. I came from nothing, and I had to fight for every bit of success I've achieved, and there were people who helped me along the way, people who believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. Jack's heart began to race. He felt a chill crawl up his spine, an unease that quickly turned into confusion and then fear. What was Elon trying to say? "You think I'm here to help you because I want to be some kind of hero, don't you?" Elon asked, his voice softening. "That's part of it. But the truth is, Jack, there's something else going on. I wasn't just giving you a handout. I was offering you a chance because..." Elon's words trailed off and the room seemed to grow colder, darker. Jack could feel his pulse quickening. Something wasn't right. "Because what?" Jack demanded, the words coming out sharper than he intended. Elon looked at him, his eyes filled with a strange mixture of regret and resolve. "Because you're not just another person in need. You're someone with a unique past, a past that I know all too well. You see, Jack, I've been watching the homeless community for years now, studying their behavior, their struggles, and you stand out. There's something in you that could change the world if you're willing to embrace it." Jack's mind raced, his thoughts spinning wildly. He couldn't process it all. "What are you saying? What do you mean? My past? Are you telling me that this whole thing, this job, this opportunity, wasn't about helping me at all?" Elon's expression hardened, a hint of something darker flickering behind his eyes. "It was about more than helping. I saw the way you interacted with people on the street, how you didn't just beg for money. You asked for something more. You asked for $1, Jack. A small amount, yes, but it was more than just asking for change. It was asking for a chance, and that's why I saw potential in you." Jack's breath caught in his throat. "You mean, you've been watching me this whole time, even when I was on the streets?" Elon nodded, his face solemn. "Yes, I've been following you, observing you, and what I saw was someone who didn't give up, someone who had hope, even in the most hopeless of situations. It wasn't just a handout I was offering you, Jack. It was a test, and you passed it." Jack's mind was reeling. "A test? What test? What the hell is going on?" Elon took a step closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "The test wasn't whether you'd succeed. It was whether you'd keep fighting no matter how hard it got. And you did. You've made it this far, Jack. But now the real question is what you're going to do with it. Will you keep pushing forward, or will you fall back into the life you knew before?" For a moment there was nothing but silence. Jack's world felt like it was crashing down around him. The weight of everything he had worked for suddenly felt like a lie. He had trusted Elon, had believed that this was his second chance, but now everything he thought he knew was being called into question. Jack's emotions swirled: anger, confusion, betrayal. But beneath it all, a single, undeniable truth echoed in his mind. This was his moment. The question wasn't whether Elon had been manipulating him. It was whether Jack was going to let that define him. "You've been using me?" Jack asked, his voice trembling. "For what? Your own experiment?" Elon didn't flinch. "No, not using you. You have the power to change the world, Jack, but it has to come from you. You have to decide who you are now. I'm not going to hold your hand through this. I gave you the opportunity to prove yourself, and you've done that. But now, it's up to you." Jack's hands clenched into fists. He was angry, yes, but he also felt something else, something stirring deep within him. This wasn't just about his past, his struggles, or the manipulation. It was about his future. It was about his choice. Elon had given him a chance, not to be a pawn in some grand experiment, but to become something greater than he had ever imagined. And now it was time for Jack to decide what that meant. "Okay," Jack said, his voice steadying. "I get it, and I'm not going to let you or anyone else define who I am. I'm going to do this, for me." Elon's face softened, the faintest trace of a smile appearing. "Good. That's all I needed to hear." As Jack walked away from that conversation, he knew things would never be the same again. The path ahead would be difficult, but it was his path now. No more doubts, no more looking over his shoulder. The world was waiting for him to step into it, and Jack was ready. The days following his conversation with Elon felt like a blur. Jack had been shaken to his core, unsure of where the path ahead would take him. The feeling of betrayal lingered in the back of his mind, but as each day passed, that feeling slowly began to fade. What remained was something far more powerful, a sense of self, a clarity of purpose. Jack had spent so much time running from his past, from the mistakes he had made, and from the painful memories of living on the streets. But now, as he stood at the crossroads of his future, he realized something that had eluded him for years. His past didn't have to define him. It wasn't a shackle. It was the fuel that could propel him forward. Over the next few weeks, Jack dedicated himself entirely to his work. He no longer saw the tasks he had once dreaded as burdens. Instead, he saw them as opportunities. He threw himself into every project, every meeting, every challenge. He was no longer working for a paycheck or approval. He was working for himself. His relationship with Elon had shifted as well. Where once there had been tension, there was now mutual respect. Elon too had changed in Jack's eyes. He wasn't the distant billionaire who saw people as tools. He was a man who understood what it was like to fight from the ground up, to take risks, and to believe in the potential of people who had been written off by society. One evening, as Jack sat in his small apartment, working late into the night, there was a knock at the door. He opened it to find Elon standing in the hallway, holding a bottle of wine in one hand and a briefcase in the other. "Thought I'd stop by," Elon said with a smile. "Got a minute?" Jack stepped aside, allowing him in. The two sat down at his kitchen table, and for the first time in what felt like forever, they shared a quiet conversation about everything and nothing. They talked about the future, about the world, about the work they were doing. There was no pressure, no expectations, just two people building something from the ground up. And as they talked, Jack realized that the journey he had begun was bigger than just him. It wasn't just about getting a job, or making money, or proving people wrong. It was about something far more profound, the opportunity to make a difference, to use the pain and struggles of his past to fuel something positive, to create change. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," Jack finally said, breaking the silence, "about how I have to decide who I am now. And you were right. I've spent too long living in the shadows of my past. It's time to step into the light, not because of what I've been through, but because of what I can do now." Elon nodded, taking a sip of his wine. "That's exactly it. It's not about where you come from. It's about what you do with what you have." Jack's eyes widened slightly, realization dawning on him. "You know, it's funny. When I first started this journey, I thought I was doing it for the wrong reasons. I thought I was trying to prove something to you, to everyone. But now I see it's not about proving anything to anyone but myself." Elon smiled. "That's the first step, Jack. When you stop trying to be someone else's idea of success and start defining success for yourself, that's when everything changes." That night, as Jack lay in bed staring at the ceiling, he reflected on everything that had happened. He had come so far, but he knew the road ahead was still long. There would be setbacks, doubts, and challenges. There always would be. But now, he was equipped to face them. Jack had spent years thinking he was unworthy, that the world had abandoned him. But with each passing day, he saw that the world was full of opportunities, full of people who were ready to believe in him if he believed in himself first. He had learned something invaluable. Sometimes the most unexpected journeys lead us to our truest selves. And in that moment, Jack knew that his life was no longer defined by the streets or the past he had left behind. He was defined by the choices he made now, the steps he took toward the future. The following weeks saw Jack continuing to grow, both in his work and in his personal life. He took on bigger projects, started to speak at events, and became a role model for others who had once been where he was. Slowly but surely, he was shaping the life he had always dreamed of. One afternoon, while walking through the city after a long day, Jack paused in front of a homeless shelter. He remembered the days when he had walked past places like that, feeling like an invisible person in a world that had no place for him. But today, as he stood there, he didn't feel invisible. He felt like he had found his place. He had built something from nothing, Not just for himself, but for the people who needed a chance, just like he had. Jack smiled to himself. He had found his purpose, and it was only just beginning. The weeks passed, and Jack found himself standing at the precipice of a new chapter in his life. The excitement of his transformation hadn't worn off. In fact, it had only grown stronger. He had faced so many obstacles, both personal and professional, but now it felt like the world was opening up to him in ways he had never imagined. The opportunities were endless. Jack had gone from living on the streets to being invited to high-profile meetings, speaking on panels and sharing his story with audiences who saw him as a symbol of resilience. It was as if his life was now a living testament to the idea that anyone, no matter their background, could change their life if they were willing to put in the work. But as Jack sat in his office staring at the view of the bustling city outside, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was still missing. He had reached so many of his goals, but there was still a part of him that felt unsettled. The truth was, Jack had always wanted to give back, to make sure that others like him who had fallen through the cracks had a chance to turn their lives around. The more he spoke to people, the more he realized that while he had been fortunate, so many others weren't. They didn't have the same resources or opportunities that he had been granted. One afternoon, as Jack sat at a cafe with a few colleagues, the topic of homelessness came up during their conversation. It was a topic that always hit close to home, and as soon as the words left his colleague's mouth, something clicked inside Jack. He needed to do more. He couldn't just keep riding the wave of his own success. He had a responsibility to make. Sure, others who were struggling had a chance too. He knew that if he had been given up on, if Elon hadn't seen the potential in him, he wouldn't be where he was today. He had been lucky, but luck wouldn't be enough for others. The decision hit him like a wave. He had to start something that would give people on the street a real shot at turning their lives around, just like he had. He began to make plans for a non-profit that would provide job training, housing support, and mentorship to the homeless. He envisioned a program that didn't just offer a handout, but rather a hand up, a chance to create a sustainable future. "I can do this," Jack whispered to himself, his fingers tapping the surface of his coffee cup. His heart raced as the ideas began to form. He felt like he had found his true calling. A few days later, Jack reached out to Elon with the idea. Elon, always eager to support new ventures, was immediately interested. "You want to create a program to help the homeless? That's exactly what the world needs right now," Elon said over the phone. "I think you're onto something big, Jack. Let's do it." With Elon's support, Jack was able to launch the initiative, the Rise Foundation. The foundation would focus on providing individuals with the tools they needed to build a life off the streets. They would offer free job training, resume workshops, and a mentorship program led by successful entrepreneurs who had once struggled with homelessness or poverty. Jack worked tirelessly to get everything in motion. He partnered with local businesses, raised funds, and began to build a team of passionate individuals who believed in the mission. The foundation wasn't just about offering a short-term solution. It was about creating long-term change in the lives of people who had been ignored for far too long. As the program began to take shape, Jack found himself back in the same places he had once known so well, the shelters, the street corners, and the alleyways. He wasn't just a visitor anymore. He was someone who understood the pain, the fear, and the struggle of people living without hope. He spoke to them, not as a former homeless man with a story of success, but as someone who understood the real journey it took to break free from the cycle. The first success story came quicker than Jack expected. A young woman named Lily had been homeless for nearly a year, struggling with addiction and mental health issues. After joining the Rise Foundation's program, she was able to find a job, get sober, and even move into her own apartment. Lily's story was just one of many, but it was the turning point Jack had been waiting for. It proved that what he was doing was making a difference, and for the first time in his life, Jack felt truly fulfilled. Helping others wasn't just about charity, it was about empowerment. It was about showing people their worth and giving them the tools to succeed. With each success, the foundation grew. Jack began to get invited to conferences and media appearances, sharing his story and the success of the Rise Foundation. People started taking notice. not just of Jack's transformation, but of the transformation he was helping others achieve. The program expanded to other cities, and soon Jack was traveling across the country, meeting with politicians, community, leaders and business owners who wanted to be a part of the change. The media took notice and Jack's story became an inspiration to millions, but for him, it was never about the spotlight. It was about the people, the individuals he was helping to turn their lives around. One evening, after a long day of meetings and planning, Jack stood in front of a crowd at a conference talking about the foundation's successes. As he looked out at the audience, he saw a sea of faces, some of them hopeful, some skeptical, but all of them listening. "I was once just like many of you," Jack began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I had nothing, no hope, no future, but someone saw something in me. Someone gave me a chance, and that's all I'm asking for you today. A chance. A chance to rise, a chance to believe in yourself, a chance to find the support you need to build the life you deserve." The room erupted into applause. Jack smiled, feeling the weight of the moment. This wasn't just about him anymore, it was about everyone. And this, he realized, was the true meaning of success. The success of the Rise Foundation had surpassed all expectations. Jack had gone from being a man on the brink of despair to becoming a beacon of hope for others. The foundation was thriving, with thousands of lives touched, transformed, and changed. His new reality felt surreal at times, as if he were living a dream. But with success came pressure. The Rise Foundation was growing rapidly, and Jack found himself juggling more responsibilities than ever. What started as a small, grassroots initiative had quickly become a national movement. And as the organization grew, so did the expectations placed on him. People looked up to Jack, admired him, and expected him to have all the answers. At first, Jack reveled in the attention. He was a man on a mission, and everything felt like it was falling into place. But as time passed, the weight of it all began to wear on him. The late-night meetings, the constant travel, and the relentless demand for his time and energy took their toll. He found himself questioning his own ability to keep up. Was he still the same person who had stood up to the challenges of his past, or had the success of the foundation changed him in ways he hadn't anticipated? It was during one of these moments of self-doubt that Jack received a call from his old friend Sarah. She had been one of the few people who had supported him during his darkest times. They hadn't spoken much since Jack's rise to success, but Sarah had been there when Jack had needed someone most. "Jack, I'm worried about you," Sarah's voice came through the phone, soft but urgent. "I've been hearing about how much you've been pushing yourself lately, and I don't think this is healthy. You've been working non-stop, and I don't want you to burn out." Jack sighed deeply. He hadn't realized just how much his work had consumed him until Sarah's words hit home. "I'm fine, Sarah. Just a little tired, that's all." "Jack, you're not fine. You've been running on empty for months. You're carrying the weight of a lot of people's hopes and dreams, but you can't do that alone. You have to take care of yourself too." Her words echoed in Jack's mind long after. The conversation ended. The truth was, Sarah was right. He had been so focused on helping others that he had neglected his own well-being. He was putting all his energy into the Rise Foundation, but at what cost? Jack had always believed that he needed to prove something, to the world, to himself. But now he was realizing that the key to sustaining the mission he had worked so hard to build wasn't in running himself into the ground. It was in finding balance. A week later, Jack took a much-needed break. He stepped away from the hustle and bustle of the foundation's work, leaving the daily operations in the hands of his trusted team. He spent time in the mountains, surrounded by nature, taking long walks and allowing himself to just be. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to relax, to breathe, and to reflect on the journey that had brought him here. During those days of solitude, Jack gained clarity. He realized that while his mission was vital, it didn't require him to sacrifice his own happiness or health. The key to making a real difference in the world wasn't about working himself to exhaustion. It was about being present, staying grounded, and leading by example. When Jack returned to the city, he came back with a renewed sense of purpose. He had learned an invaluable lesson. He couldn't pour from an empty cup. To help others, he first had to help himself. And with that newfound wisdom, he began to make changes. He started delegating more to his team, trusting them to carry the load. He made time for himself, for his friends, and for the people who mattered most. And he made sure that every decision he made, both for the foundation and for his personal life, was in alignment with his values: compassion, integrity, and sustainability. One of the first things Jack did upon returning was meet with the people he had helped along the way. He went to the shelters and programs where the Rise Foundation had made a difference, not as a leader, but as a friend. He listened to their stories, their struggles, and their triumphs. He reminded himself why he had started this journey in the first place. During one of his visits, he met a man named Marcus, who had been living on the streets for years. Marcus had recently joined the Foundation's program, and after months of hard work, he had found a job at a local cafe. His transformation wasn't as quick as some, but his progress was steady. "Jack, I have to thank you," Marcus said, his voice filled with gratitude. "You didn't just help me find a job. You helped me find myself again. I thought I'd never be able to get out of that life, but now I have hope." Jack smiled, feeling a rush of pride. "You did all the hard work, Marcus. You just needed someone to believe in you." Later that evening, as Jack stood alone in a quiet corner of the city, looking out over the skyline, he thought about how far he had come. He had gone from begging for $1 on the streets to building something that had changed thousands of lives. But the most important thing he had learned along the way wasn't how to achieve success. It was how to stay true to his mission without losing himself in the process. The rise of the Rise Foundation wasn't just about helping people off the streets. It was about empowering people to rise above their circumstances. And Jack realized that in order to do that, he had to keep rising himself, learning, evolving, and growing with the journey. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the city as Jack stood on the rooftop of his office building. He was far from the man who once roamed the streets without a purpose, struggling to survive each day. Now he had a purpose beyond himself, a purpose that had transformed not just his life, but the lives of countless others. The Rise Foundation had become an enduring force for good, helping to bridge the gap for those who had been forgotten by society. Its programs had expanded, reaching not only the homeless but also those living in poverty, struggling with addiction, or facing mental health challenges. But the success of the foundation wasn't just about numbers or growth. It was about the deep, tangible impact it had on the people it served. Jack's phone buzzed, breaking his reverie. It was a message from Elon Musk, a man who had become not only a supporter, but a close friend and advisor throughout Jack's journey. "We need to talk. I've been thinking about taking the Rise Foundation to a global scale. Let's discuss how we can change the world." Jack smiled. The idea of expanding the foundation even further had crossed his mind more than once. But now, seeing Elon's message, he knew the time had come to think even bigger. He had gone from being a man with nothing to a man with everything. Everything, that is, except the opportunity to do even more. It was a daunting thought. Expanding on a global scale would require more resources, more partnerships, and most importantly, a vision that could be shared with the world. But Jack knew deep in his heart that it was a step worth taking. There were still so many people around the world who were just like he had been, lost, hopeless, and struggling to survive. He couldn't stop now. The next day, Jack met with Elon and a group of passionate philanthropists, business leaders, and social entrepreneurs who were eager to help push the foundation to new heights. As they discussed their plans, Jack couldn't help but feel a surge of gratitude. Years ago, he never would have imagined being part of a conversation like this, let alone leading the charge to change the world. But the world wasn't the only thing that was changing. Jack was too. Throughout his journey, he had learned that success wasn't about achieving personal glory or wealth. It wasn't about accolades or recognition. It was about the lives he touched and the legacy he left behind. It was about creating lasting change, and more importantly, about showing people the power they had within themselves to change their own lives. The Rise Foundation's new global initiative focused on breaking the cycle of homelessness, poverty, and despair through education, empowerment, and support. Jack's role was no longer just about leading the organization. It was about being the face of hope for millions who had never believed that a second chance was possible. As they finalized their plans, Jack's thoughts drifted back to the day when he had stood outside Elon's office and asked for that $1. He had been a man with nothing, asking for help, not knowing that this one moment would set him on the path to something greater than he could have ever imagined. But as Jack looked at the team gathered around him, people who believed in him, in his vision, and in the mission of the Rise Foundation, he knew that it was no longer just about him. It was about all of them, about every person who had ever reached out for a lifeline, hoping that someone, somewhere, would see their potential. As the meeting concluded, and Jack prepared to head home, he took a moment to reflect on how far he had come. His life was no longer defined by the streets, by the loneliness, or by the fear of failure. It was defined by the people he had helped, the impact he had made, and the hope he had brought into the world. He walked out into the cool evening air, the sounds of the city humming around him. For the first time in years, Jack felt at peace. The journey had been long, but it had led him to something far greater than he could have ever imagined. The foundation was growing, and so was Jack, evolving, adapting, and pushing forward. He was no longer the man who had nothing. He was the man who had everything he had ever needed: purpose, hope, and the opportunity to change the world. As he walked down the street, he saw a young man sitting on the curb, his head down, his body slumped in exhaustion. Jack stopped, his heart stirring with recognition. He walked up to the young man, crouching down to meet his eyes. "Hey there," Jack said, his voice gentle yet firm. "I see you, and I know what you're going through, but listen, it's not the end, it's just the beginning." The young man looked up, confusion and skepticism in his eyes. Jack reached into his pocket, pulling out a business card for the Rise Foundation. "I don't have all the answers," Jack continued, "but I've been where you are, and I can tell you it gets better. All you need is someone who believes in you, so let us be that someone. Come to our program. We'll help you get back on your feet." The young man hesitated, but something in Jack's eyes told him that this wasn't just another empty promise, this was real. He took the card, his fingers trembling slightly, and Jack gave him a nod before walking away. As he continued his walk home, Jack felt a sense of fulfillment wash over him. He wasn't done yet. There were still more people to help, more lives to change, but now more than ever he was confident that the mission would never stop. He had learned that the road to success wasn't always easy, but with hope, perseverance, and a willingness to reach out, anything was possible. The Rise Foundation was just the beginning. Jack's true legacy would be the impact he left on every person who had ever felt like they were invisible, every person who had ever felt like they didn't matter, and as he looked up at the stars above the city, he knew that his story was far from over. It had only just begun. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?